I'm Richard Dodd, and you're listening to the Ecology Academy podcast. This is a show where we get to talk and learn about all things ecological, including interviews with top ecologists, both employers and employees, those working with ecologists, and also aspiring and inspiring career-seeking individuals setting out to make a difference. The show aims to provide you with insights, advice, and inspiration to help you succeed and excel as an effective ecologist and to make a real difference to our natural environment. Today I'm speaking with Sally Hayns, who is the Chief Executive at the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management and has spent the last 10 years leading one of the fastest growing and dynamic professional membership bodies as it celebrates its 30th birthday this month. Prior to taking on this highly challenging role, Sally worked with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust as Head of People and Wildlife and as Public Affairs Manager at the City of London Corporation. So Sally Hayns, welcome to the Ecology Academy podcast.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure. And I say we've been trying to organise this for a few months, and I've been on a holiday, and obviously diaries sort of mismatch as well. But thank you for your time today for coming along for the podcast. Now, just before we start though with the with some of the questions, I've got a few questions of my own. So they're quick fire questions, and I like to start the show with these sort of icebreakers. No right or wrong answer. Really deep and meaningful, of course. You know, so Myers-Briggs will be extremely impressed with the sort of level of detail we're going to go into on the next few questions. So, armed with very little preparation, are you ready?
Okay, go for it.
Great. First of all, habitats, species, or ecosystems?
Ecosystems.
Okay, and which one, if you had to choose one?
Which ecosystem?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one. Marine and coastal.
Okay, yeah. Why is that? Why did you go for marine?
I did, as we'll possibly talk about later, I did my master's in ecology at Bangor, and I got particularly interested in marine and coastal ecology. That was my area of research. And when I went on to teach at the Field Studies Council, I was particularly strong on marine and coastal fieldwork. So,
great. And
I love the sea.
Great. Okay, then. And second question then to yourself, Sally. Books, films, or music?
Books.
Books.
I love books.
Yeah. What are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading something by an author called Philip Gray. It's a series, well, it's a whole series of them about a particular sort of German police commissioner and what happens to him during the war and after the war and so on. So yeah, it's my father-in-law lent it to me, so
okay,
I'm giving it a go.
I'll have a look out for that one. Yeah. And work from home, office, or other location?
To be honest, a blend of home and office. Obviously, spent a lot of time working from home recently. And I do like it, the convenience of it, but I miss the office environment as well. So we're looking forward to getting back to that mix of home and office fairly shortly, actually.
Okay, great. And I'm sure we'll come on to that in during the course of the questioning as well. Questioning. It sounds like it's going to be an interrogation. It's not.
Conversation. I think you meant conversation.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I would call it a fireside chat, but maybe not. Yeah. It is. During at the moment. But okay. So now this is a very challenging one. Okay. Now, would you say CIEEM, CIEEM, or CIEEM, or is there another way of saying it? Do you think?
CIEEM every time.
Every time. No, I'm totally in that camp. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just trips off the tongue easier. And finally, you'd be pleased to know, if money and time were no longer an issue, how would you travel from your home to your dream holiday location?
By train and boat, I think. I'd obviously want to avoid flying for obvious environmental reasons. It would be a bit challenging. I think my dream holiday destination, it does change from time to time, but at the moment it's Costa Rica. So I would have to plot a route by boat and train to get there. So it would take me a long time, but then that's part of the fun of a dream holiday experience, isn't it? The
Yeah,
journey.
absolutely. Yes, it's about the sort of the adventure of getting there rather than just the destination itself. Yeah. Have you been to Costa Rica
Absolutely.
before?
No, I haven't. So that's why it's a bit of a dream. To be honest, Richard, I could have given you quite a list of places
Yes. Yeah.
that are on my to-do list. But just before the COVID in March 2020, we were due to go to Japan. So that was one of our dream holiday destinations that
Right.
hasn't quite worked out yet. So, but
No.
Costa Rica is currently my number one
Number one.
target.
Okay. And I suppose, once you got to Costa Rica, what would you be doing? Do you think?
I think exploring the country, traveling around, there's lots of sort of wildlife to see, lots of good sort of ecosystems to explore, a bit of diving, scuba diving. So yeah, it'll be traveling around, trying to get to some of the less visited bits as well, and eating some great seafood would be good as
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm there already. By the
well.
sounds of it. Yeah, that's amazing.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't be averse to a day on the beach, but not too much.
No, okay. Great. Well, thank you very so much for that. That's the end of those extremely challenging questions. I'll send those off to Myers-Briggs, and I'll let you know the results
Tell me
a
what
bit
comes
later on.
back.
Okay, very introspective results. Yeah, of course. So, okay. So, first of all, Sally, can you outline for me? I mean, I know you a little bit from obviously as the chief executive of CIEEM, as we've agreed
Yeah.
it is now. So CIEEM, and we've had a few conversations before. But for those who have unfortunately have not heard about yourself, could you
Mhm.
remind both myself and our audience about your career journey?
Mhm.
And also perhaps take us from when you were adult years all the way up just to before you started to work with CIEEM.
Sure, absolutely. So I grew up in Walthamstow in East London, so quite an urban upbringing, and not much opportunity to um, travel very widely. But my playground as a child was Epping Forest, and I used to love spending sort of school holidays and weekends with friends playing in the forest, and I just loved that environment. And when I did my A levels at school, and I did A level biology, the bit that really stood out for me was my A level ecology field course at the Field Studies Council at Down Fort in West Wales. And I just loved it. And I thought, I want my tutor's job, but the person that was teaching us, that Field Studies Council tutor, I want their job. So I set about planning how to get that job. Um,
Who was the tutor at the time? Can you remember?
it was two actually. It was a lady called Teresa Bennett, um, and I think Anna Spencer. I think was the Anna Sutcliffe was the other one. They taught us as a dual team, and they've both been signing members as well. So that's a small world. So I had that in the back of my mind, but then I also became quite interested for strange reasons. I never quite worked out in farming. So when I finished my A levels, so I was going to go to Lancaster to do a biological sciences degree, but I decided to have a year off and go and work on a farm for a year because that's what girls from East London didn't do. And I went and worked on a dairy farm in Somerset. And that got me really interested in sort of farming and wildlife. So I thought, well, maybe I want to be a flag officer instead. Um, and then after that year, I changed degree intention really, and I did biology and maths. I did a joint degree in biology and maths. I was really interested in biology, and particularly the ecology aspects of biology, but I was good at maths. And with employment prospects not particularly great, I thought that would be quite a useful insurance. And then at the end of that degree, I wanted to do a master's. I need to get a grant from NERC, as it was then, Natural Environment Research Council. And I got offered a grant to do either a master's in biological computations, the use of computers in biology, which was a new master's being set up at the University of York, or a master's in ecology at Bangor. So I let my heart warm my head, and did the ecology at Bangor, because that was what I was really interested in. And even if I wasn't, if I was going to struggle perhaps to get a job, but I did that master's. That led on to a sort of 6-month research project for Snowdonia National Park Authority, which led on for my dissertation, which was about looking at the application of remote sense data to monitor changes in vegetation cover and land use.
Yeah.
But then at the end of that 6 months, I got my dream job and became that Field Studies Council tutor.
I was going to say, yeah, you mentioned it earlier
Although
on.
I was at Nettlecombe Court on Exmoor.
I do. I was a
So,
placement student there myself.
oh right,
So
okay.
would you?
Well,
Yeah, I know Nettlecombe very well.
Nettlecombe very well. Obviously, became my favourite FSC centre. But yeah, I became tutor, then senior tutor in ecology there. I loved it. Again, there were days when the sun was shining and you were standing on the top of Exmoor, on the coast at Exmoor. You couldn't believe you were being paid to do it. And then there were other days when you were getting cold and wet, it was, you thought, why am I doing this job? But I loved it. And so I was there for several years. And then I moved on to the Wildfire and Wetlands Trust at Arundel. So completely different environment, but it kind of had set the train of me working for a series of environmental NGOs, which I really enjoyed and was learning a lot. And then I decided to go traveling around the world for a year. So I packed that job in and went traveling. And when I came back, I was looking for job adverts and I saw a job advert for a charity called Learning Through Landscapes, which I happen to know was based in Hampshire, in Winchester. And it was talking about an education officer for Thames Chase Community Forest. Well, I didn't know where Thames Chase Community Forest was, but I thought, well, Thames, Oxfordshire, imagine the Thames winding its way through the countryside. I thought, that can't be too bad. So I applied for it, only to find that the forest didn't actually exist yet. And it was about creating this new community forest in East London. So I became the Learning Through Landscapes education officer for Thames Chase, the community forest to the east of London, which wasn't the shortest job title I've ever had. But it was exciting to be part of the community forest programme at the time. And then that led on to becoming the head of Learning Through Landscapes across London. So creating a new regional structure and a new regional post. And that then led me on to joining the City of London Corporation at Epping Forest, which was back very much to my childhood roots. And I just fell in love with the forest all over again. Got to know it really, really well. Some great projects. We were looking to reintroduce free range grazing to the forest to try and recreate the wood pasture. We were doing lots of pond restoration and habitat management plans. And it was a really, really great job. And I was there for 6 years. And then for personal reasons, wanted to relocate down to Hampshire. So that's when I joined the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. Yeah. And I then covered their sort of membership fundraising, all of their sort of environmental education, outreach work, and the work on reserves, and communications and so on. So I was a really exciting role and exciting time to be with the Wildlife Trust. Got to work with a number of other wildlife trusts as well. But I felt something was missing. So I decided in my spare time to do another master's degree in voluntary sector management, which is the charity equivalent of an MBA. So I did that at City University, sort of evenings and weekends. And then after that, I was thinking about what to do next when my current job came along. So I guess it's a good few years now since I'd probably say my job at City of London Corporation at Epping Forest was the last time I was doing sort of practical ecology and surveys and field work. An interesting career, and I've learned so much from every job I've ever had. Wow. And really enjoyed it and met some wonderful people. So I've been very fortunate.
That sounds absolutely such a diverse range of roles as well. And I think one thing that seems to unify them, though, Sally, seems to be this larger connection with people and community. So, it seems to stem back right from, I suppose, the community forest management work you've been you undertook, and the Field Studies Council work. So, where does that passion come from?
I don't know so much you can really put your finger on where it comes from. I think I've been fortunate through my life that I've had people that have deliberately or inadvertently given me some sort of real light bulb moments about the environment, about nature and wildlife, and some really special experiences, and being able to share that with others. One of the things I really loved about working with the Field Studies Council, I would get a group of A-level students, perhaps, or GCSE students arriving on a Wednesday evening who didn't want to be there, who had left boyfriends, girlfriends, Saturday jobs, whatever, and the thought of coming out to this yucky countryside and for a week and working really long hours and so on was just dreadful. But at the end of the week, they would be not wanting to go home, or they'd be saying how much they'd learned and how much they'd really enjoyed it, and just seeing that transformation and that seeing people fall in love with nature, I think is a really wonderful thing. And, to be involved in creating those opportunities, I personally find very inspiring.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I love my time with the Field Studies Council. As you say, it's there. I mean, it just teaches you so much about people, but also about wildlife and the connection between those two. And I think I've got the Field Studies Council, particularly in Nettleton Court, a lot to thank for my career. So wonderful. So great, thanks for that, bringing us to date. So I suppose my next question, leading on from there, is now CIEEM are celebrating their 30th year as a professional body. So I mean, what sort of challenges have you faced, particularly under your 10 years of tenure as a chief executive? So, what challenges have CIEEM faced over those 30 years, do you think?
Okay, well, 30 years is still relatively young for a professional body, and we're still regarded as quite a young profession. Careers in ecology didn't really take off till the sort of 70s and 80s, certainly after the Wildlife and Countryside Act. In the UK. So we're still a relatively young profession. And I think in our early days, so during the 90s, it was quite a struggle. There was a group of really passionate people, some who were founder members of the Institute, several of whom are still with us today, which is great, who worked so hard to get the Institute off the ground, but it was all voluntary. All the effort was voluntary. Everything was done on a voluntary basis. And it was about 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years before they could have their first paid member of staff. So as soon as you start...
Sorry, Sally. I mean, why was it set up? I mean, what was the driving force or forces behind setting up the institute at that time?
Well, I think it was that there was recognition that there was more people taking it up as a career and as a profession, but that they didn't necessarily have much of a voice or much opportunity for networking. Most people were members of the British Ecological Society, and still are. I mean, we share a lot of members in common, but that was very much going down the research and sort of learned society route. There wasn't a lot for people who were primarily interested in applied ecology. And of course, there was also a crossover with geography. So it was actually a group of BES members and Royal Geographical Society members that sort of organised some meetings to sort of moot the idea of a new professional body for ecologists and environmental managers. And there was much talk at the time whether it should be just ecology or environmental management as well. And if it's environmental management, what aspect of the environmental management is it? But the decision was taken to go for it. And it was launched as an institute in 1991. And it's just took quite a long time, as these things often can, to grow some traction and to start to grow. So with few members, there wasn't a lot of money coming in. Without money, you can't provide a lot by way of service or events. But it started with the traditional professional body sort of activities of conferences. For example, it might do 1 or 2 conferences a year, and also providing a publication in practice. And then gradually things like membership criteria came in, a code of professional conduct. The first geographic section was formed when a group of members said, we'd actually like to have some sort of network structure. And gradually over time, through the end of the 90s and into the noughties, the Institute started to grow, but we're still struggling, I think, to find its voice. Certainly when I joined, I was very aware. I mean, and the Institute was still very small at the time. There were 7 members of staff, and we didn't have very much profile as an institute or as a professional body. So, for example, in terms of government, if they were doing a big launch of a white paper or some event or some stakeholder consultation, we were never on the list. So, we really had to fight hard to raise our profile, to find and then use our voice, and to exert some influence. And that was one of my key priorities over the time that I've been CEO. So I'm particularly proud, I think, of our policy work and how we've developed that policy profile and that voice. I think we are now proactively consulted by governments and by statutory nature conservation bodies. They seek our advice. We get involved in partnership projects with them where that's appropriate. So that's something that has enormously changed over the last 10 years.
Sorry, Sally. So I know there probably wasn't one defining moment that sort of turned it around, or as it is turning around. But what activities were CIEEM at that point involved with, in terms of actually setting the agenda for ecologists and environmental managers back in the mid-90s, shall we say?
I think in the mid-90s, there wasn't very much. It was very internally focused. That was part of the problem, because it was such a small organisation, and with little or no staffing and no money. It was all very about servicing the members. It was only really as the organisation grew towards the latter end of the noughties, so sort of 2007 onwards, and then when I came, I sort of made it a priority that we needed to be much more proactive in this area. And that's just hard graft. It's responding to consultations, giving really well-considered, evidence-based responses to government consultations, and following that up, going and talking to MPs repeatedly, going and talking to the right civil servants. Those are the ways you start to get yourself known and making a difference. And we also were producing really high quality industry guidance as well by then. And that is actually very influential in terms of allowing statutory nature conservation bodies, for example, or local planning authorities, to say, yes, we want you to do it this way. That's how we want you to do that particular process or that particular assessment. So that started to add to our reputation as well. It's all about, at that stage, reputation. With that, you start to grow your membership. So our membership numbers were going up. And then we introduced our competency framework. So we started to try and give more structure to the profession, to create more in the way of progression through the profession as well. And that then influenced our membership assessment criteria. And all of these kinds of things, the expanding our training program, we were able to demonstrate our leadership of the profession, which of course led to us getting our Royal Charter in 2013. And that was a big step for us, because it also gave us the power which was quite unusual at that time, the power to create the Register of Chartered Ecologists. I'm going to say at the time, not many new registers were being established, so that was another big step for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when he came into the chartership, and I think, as you say, he was sort of before that route. It was chartered environmentalist, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Which we still obviously
you still offer.
Offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, I suppose, the resources you were providing to ecologists and environmental managers, then you mentioned also about reputation. And increasing visibility of the organisation, and leading to growth in terms of membership. So going back to sort of reputation, then. So some people will argue that what does CIEEM provide to me? It's all very individualistic, but but what does CIEEM provide to ecologists and environmental managers?
I think it's a good question. I think it's about what any professional body provides to its members. We're not a trade association. We're not here to lobby on members' behalf and represent your interests as a business, but we are there to provide support through access to training and knowledge sharing events and networking opportunities. We're there to provide regulation, which of course within CIEEM is voluntary because people choose to be a member. So through the Code of Professional Conduct, but that gives the public assurance that you're working to a high standard and that you can be held to account if you're not working to those high standards. Producing the guidance that the industry needs, the guidance documents, and also the engagement with policy and the engagement with if you like, policy decisions that affect practice. We're doing that on behalf of the members and the industry. So it's not so much, there are personal benefits, which are around things like discounted access to training, but mainly it's about being part of the development of your profession and your profession's voice and influence, which in itself should benefit you in terms of your professional practice. It's as much a cause-led membership as it is a benefits-led membership.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally valid point. So I think a lot of sort of the commentary I read or hear is what does CIEEM do for me? It's I think that's where it's driven from. Is that, as you say, it's not meant to be for the individual, but for the whole sector, and therefore in terms of the whole environment as well, the natural environment. So so in terms of holding CIEEM to account, then. So what can we expect from CIEEM in terms of representing our industry or sector, requirements or sort of our roles as ecologists and environmental managers?
I think it's about engaging with decision makers who are making, people who are making decisions that affect what we do and how we do it, and giving the perspective of the ecologist and environmental manager, and how the industry can both be effectively delivering biodiversity restoration, and also how decisions taken by, say, governments or statutory nature conservation bodies could actually inadvertently, sure, but could actually stop us delivering those good outcomes for biodiversity that we would seek to provide. So, for example, we would comment on things like the new proposals for planning reform, which for a lot of our members could have quite significant implications as to how we do our job. We would be wanting to represent the industry's views and trying to ensure that any proposals that go forward are going to deliver the best outcomes for biodiversity and how our members can contribute to that, rather than actually close opportunities off. So it's about trying to make sure that the professional's voice is heard in all the right places. And we spend a lot of time building up links with decision makers, influencers, other organisations that we partner with in order to make that voice heard effectively. So it's a really important part of our role.
Yeah.
I would just go back just very quickly though, Richard. It's not that there aren't some individual member benefits, and things like being able to get advice on career progression, mentoring platform, member assistance program. These are all personal, individual benefits. But it's I don't think people should lose sight of the fact that they're also part of a collective movement as well. And that's what makes us strong as a profession and gives us that louder voice that can affect decision making.
Great. No, they're very valid points. And yeah, I must admit, if anyone's interested in the mentoring platform, I do recommend you get on there, either as a mentor or a mentee. Really, because I think everyone has a role. It doesn't matter what level of experience. I think everyone could offer both those sort of levels. Being a mentor. I mean, I have my own mentors, and I'm a mentee to other people. So I think it just works. Say it's giving back, but also, there's always someone and something to learn off someone.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things we want to start encouraging is a bit more by way of reverse mentoring. So where traditionally it's a more senior person mentoring a less experienced person, we also want to flip that around a bit, and so allow perhaps the person who is traditionally seen them as a mentor learn from the less practical experienced person, but has maybe got some different life experiences to share and different perspectives as well.
And I think you mentioned a little bit previously within this recording about the career progression framework document, career framework documents you created. How instrumental? How long did that take to put together? I'm sure it's not a finished article; it's always evolving. But how important is that? And who is your target audience for it? Other than saying it's for to sort of as a membership guidance in terms of objectives throughout their career. But how important is it for employers, for instance?
Oh, it's really important. I think we are not an example of good practice as an industry in terms of how we support people to come into our profession and then support them through it. There were so many different routes in. Well, I say there were so many different routes in. It's still very much a graduate, a degree-led entry into the profession, which is something we'd like to see change. But there are many different types of degrees and many different ways in. And I think that we need to have more structured advice and support for people coming in to help them see how they where they fit within the, if you like, the whole competency framework approach that we take, and how they can progress through and what that looks like and what training and support's available to help them. But it's really important that employers engage with that. We have responsibility as employers to support and develop our staff, and I think you need to understand how they want to learn and where they want to get to, and what resources you can provide or can facilitate to help them do that. So career progression and how we treat people within our profession in their early years is really, really important.
Okay, so there's a lot of guidance there for employees. Is it CIEEM's role, responsibility, or maybe collaboration of, how do you engage with employers then? Because obviously it's not an employer membership organisation, is it?
There's
a registered practice, yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things, I think. So we produce a lot of guidance for employees, but there is also guidance that is useful to employers. So, for example, our good working practices is useful for both employees and employers. Our guidance on providing good quality work experience opportunities, internships, and so on is all for employers. Our members are individuals rather than employers. So, and as I said before, we're not a trade association, but we look to engage with employers as employers of our members to influence what they do. So our registered practices scheme, which you've mentioned, is for companies or organisations. It doesn't make them members of the Institute, but it's a scheme where if the majority of your relevant staff are members, practicing members of CIEEM, then you could become a registered practice, provided you're prepared to commit to a number of criteria, which includes following our guidance on good working practices, supporting the professional development of staff, and so on. And we want to look at how we can be shining a spotlight on registered practices as good employers, because they're doing those things. But in order to do that, we're also thinking that we need to reassure ourselves that they are doing what they've signed up to do. So we're thinking about how we might introduce some sort of auditing process for registered practices, and we'll be talking to them about that later this year. So we are also supporting, but not leading, a new employers working group. You may be aware, Richard, we've done quite a bit of work this year. Well, I know you're aware, actually, we've done quite a bit of work this year looking at early career issues. That's identified some actions that we can take forward. So, for example, we're creating a new early careers special interest group that we will be very hands-on in supporting. We are going to be doing a lot more engagement with final year degree students to help prepare them for the world of work and what questions they should be asking employers and what good working practices and so on look like. And we are, but there are a number of other things we're going to be doing, but there are some things that we can't do because we are not, employers are not our members. So we can't, for example, make decisions about what reasonable salary bands are for people at different stages in their career and provide guidance on that. We can't make decisions about what reasonable survey workload looks like, but we can support a group of employers to come together to do that and have those discussions and help get that, disseminate that. So we've got a new employers working group starting in October that are going to have those kinds of tasks on their agenda. It's about getting employers to take some responsibility for solving some of the problems we've heard about this year, as well, and supporting them to do that, rather than CIEEM being the one to say, we've got all the answers. We're not in your situation, employers, but we have got all the answers anyway, so please do it this way. That's not going to work. It needs to be employers-led. There are things we can do for individuals as our members, and we propose to do that, but we need to engage with employers, but we need them to be leading some of those changes as well.
Great. And in terms of, I suppose, also linked within that question itself, with your answer, Sally, is, you know, we've all heard sort of stories of an exploitation with, you know, I don't like titles at all particularly. I mean, we're thinking of changing within our own company, but entry-level ecologists, you know, just those who are starting out in their career, and in one way, I don't want to say it's naivety, but in terms of you just don't know what to expect when you first start. You're grateful for that position. You get on with the role. How detrimental is it to our profession, do you think? And also ways to actually resolve these issues of that exploitation at the early stage of your career?
I think it's hugely detrimental. It does us no credit whatsoever. And at a time when we're trying to create a more diverse and inclusive profession, being in danger of developing a reputation as a profession where there's sometimes abusive management of staff and use of staff is just really something we should be tackling with. But we need employers to be part of the solution. It's not all employers by any means. There's lots of really good employers out there. So we want to say, well, how comes you can manage your staff effectively and support them and treat them appropriately and others can't? What are you doing right? And how do we share that good practice? How do we make it unacceptable for employers to treat staff the way some of them appear to be treating their staff? How do we allow the people in those situations to recognize that they are bad situations and to then know what to do about it and to be able to talk to other people about it? You know, we have some systems and processes in place with the Members Assistance Programme and the mentoring platform, or ways of getting advice. But we think by creating a special interest group, so a network for early career professionals, they'll be able to talk to each other as well and get advice. They'll also have a direct route into CIEEM to get further advice. But we want to make it unacceptable for employers to expect staff to work the kind of hours they're working, or for the kind of salaries that they're offering, or the lack of salary that we're offering, for it to become just unacceptable, and for people to find out much more easily who the good employers are and who they should avoid. And that comes back to also going into the universities to final year students and saying, you know, when you're looking for a job, this is what you should be asking for. This is what you should be looking for. These are the questions to ask of a prospective employer, and just challenge to push back a little bit more. But also, if you find yourself in a situation that is really damaging to your both your physical, mental well-being and your financial situation, how to get out as well, and not see that as the end of your career. We saw far too many examples of, you know, employers saying, well, it was tough when I started, why should it be any easier now? And that's just completely unacceptable. Absolutely. We should be making it a profession to be proud of, a profession that people want to come into, a profession that they clearly see their way in and get treated with respect, and treated properly. You know, we're fortunate, most of us, we're really passionate about what we do, and we're passionate about nature, and wanting to do the right thing by nature. But that doesn't mean that we need to, you know, anybody has any right to be abused or to be abusive like that. So we need to change some of our working practices, and we need to create some employer momentum around that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think, you know, there should be people wearing like a badge of honor, you know, or see it as a rite of passage that, you know, you have to do those, you know, 5 back-to-back dusk and dawn surveys.
Absolutely not.
It's detrimental to one's own health, and as well as you know, how can you function the next day? And if people say, well, you know, it's my body, it's my, you know, it's my decision, but sometimes it's the way employers ask you those questions as well. Would you mind doing this back-to-back survey? Would you mind going up to this, you know? And how can you refuse that? You know, it's extremely difficult to say no.
And it is, you know, we see, you know, we've had people saying to us, well, I really didn't want to do it. I felt exhausted, but I could see my manager was under pressure, and I was going to be letting everybody down if I didn't do it. And, you know, and people, you shouldn't be in that situation. And we all have different levels of how well we can cope with interrupted sleep and, you know, and very long working days. But that doesn't make any of us any better or any worse than anybody else. We should be doing what is reasonable and appropriate and working to our strengths. So we do need a bit of a culture change in some areas, and CIEEM as an organisation is absolutely part of that and engaged with that, and wants to help effect that change going forward. And we want to work with like-minded employers, and, you know, and there are good employers, as I say. If a good employer who can manage their staff and their workloads effectively and still turn a profit, if they're a private company, then maybe they can tell others how to do it as well. Because the knock-on effect is that some companies take on far more work than they've got staff for, which is why they then staff are working such long hours, and the work is charged out, or the work is done for low rates, and that's another problem within the profession. You know, people are not necessarily charging for the amount of time the work should take, and consequently that damages the profession as well. We need to know our worth as ecologists and environmental managers, and we're not going to have other professions respecting us and respecting our worth if we're always doing things very cheaply.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think, as you say, there's some great examples out there of employers who do get it right, seem to get it right, and I've heard about their companies who are, their ecologists are on the same pay scale as their engineers, for instance, in the same pay grades, and I think that's to be applauded. So, I mean, just a couple of questions relating to, as not the other end of this, but okay, so that's early career ecologists. How about supporting those who actually been in it for a while now, maybe come to a senior position within a company, maybe move on to management. Now, I don't know about yourselves, but we can see certainly that it's a real struggle to recruit senior or managers, directors within our profession. A couple of questions are based on that. Is that your experience? If so, what can CIEEM do to support those individuals, but also maybe the employers, perhaps, as well, and also about another question based upon that. You touched on about sort of accreditation. But the name ecologist, and I don't know if this is time and place to do it now, but in terms of the protection of the word, the name ecologist, is that something that CIEEM is working towards as well?
Okay, so in terms of your first question, I think there is an issue at the moment in terms of the more senior roles, the availability of applicants for more senior roles in the profession. I think to some extent it stems from the sort of crash in 2008, where then for a few years there was less recruitment into the profession. There was a bit less work around, and there was less recruitment into the profession. And we're seeing the impact of that now, because these are the people, 10, 12 years of experience, that should be ready and for these senior roles. So I don't think there's anything we can do about that retrospectively. I think through some of our initiatives, we can provide some support. So again, the mentoring platform is just as appropriate for people who are looking to advance to the next stage of their career as it is for those who are starting out on the career. And there's quite a few mentors there that are particularly keen to support experienced ecologists to progress and to step up and to find the right way of doing that. I think in the same way that we're soon launching our sort of early career training program for ecologists and environmental managers, once that's off the ground and running next year, I'd like to then perhaps be thinking about a management and leadership program. If we can think that we can add some value to it in terms of coming from the ecologist and environmental manager perspective. So I think there are some things that we can do. We also have to recognise there's a lack of ecologists and environmental managers at key levels at the moment. Across the country, there's some very big projects that are absorbing a lot of ecologist time, and consequently, that's left other projects and other companies, scrabbling around trying to find suitably qualified and competent staff. So it is going to take time to sort out, but I also think it's quite an exciting time to be coming into ecology and environmental management as a profession. There's lots of roles out there, lots of work, and I'm not talking just about the private sector. One of my ambitions when coming into the institute was to make it an institute for ecologists and environmental managers across all sectors, particularly coming from such a strong NGO and local authority background. So I don't feel we've achieved that to the extent that I would like at the moment, but I would like to be providing more support and engagement for ecologists from non-consultancy sectors. But the reality is that about 65 to 70% of the profession are working in the private sector. And then there was a second part to your question, which I've now forgotten.
Oh, well, I'll come to that in a second, but just going back slightly onto that, a little bit, expanding on the roles of senior ecologists. Now, I'm sure, well, I'll just give you an example. So, I think, this is anecdotal, but that, we were seeing a lack of senior ecologists Or because I think a lot of these people are also leaving the profession. It's not that there's a shortfall, but actually they're getting to a certain point and going, do you know what? Either the company's wrong for me, the type of work is wrong for me. I'm being pushed into, and I'm not asking you to solve these questions, answer questions at all. The type of work is wrong for me. I'm being pushed more into a managerial profession role, should we say, rather than actually the ecological profession, which is what I joined. And so don't feel supported as I'm not a great people person. I understand that I need to supervise people, but my greatest passion is undertaking those surveys, undertaking those the reports, providing advice to my clients. I don't want to be put into a role where I'm actually managing people, project management. It's not for me, especially at this pay scale. I'm off. I mean, is that? I mean, that's sort of my experience, and talking to a few people that have actually left their roles.
Yes, it certainly does happen. I don't think it's any more noticeable than in other professions. I think there are, historically, a lot of people, how they progress was to move into management, and either that's of people or projects, and become more desk-based than field-based. And that happens in other professions as well. And for some people, that's not the right route to go. So they might stay where they are, or they might, as you say, leave the profession. But it's not untypical, I'm afraid, for people as they progress to be expected to take on some kind of management responsibilities. But I think there's another issue around senior management, which is where we are losing people is primarily women who they may have a career break to have children. They look to come back into the profession and look to come back into the kinds of organisations they were working for before, and there's just not enough flexibility. It's a tough profession, and the kind of hours, not only the length of the hours, but when the hours need to be worked sometimes. There's not sufficient flexibility for many people who want part-time, perhaps working, or more flexible working approaches. And so they choose to leave and often go into be self-employed, and become subcontractors or set up their own small consultancies. So that is, I think, another big contributing factor. It's not always women, sometimes it's men, but a big contributing factor to there not being enough people to go into the senior manager's role, because we're losing quite a few people just before they get to that stage, because the working conditions they just can't make it work with care responsibilities. So I think that's probably a bigger issue that I see than people making a choice to leave their profession altogether.
No, I think a combination maybe of all those really, but. Yeah, the second question, Sally, was regarding the protection of the name ecologist.
Oh yeah.
Now, is that a good thing, or do you think actually it's a route we shouldn't be going
down? We think that we want to see it protected, and indeed, just it's last month now. It's August. I was writing to some government departments about it. The difficulty is that the government as a whole is not in favour of having more control over the professions, including having protected titles, unless there's a need, unless effectively the public are at risk. That's what's their key decision. But we are making representations to them on the basis that they're, at the moment, anybody can call themselves an ecologist. Anybody can do a bat survey, for example, or a waterfall survey. They might do it very well, they might do it very poorly. But there's no requirement for them to necessarily have demonstrated any competence before calling themselves an ecologist. And we think that does put the public at risk, it puts society at risk, it puts nature at risk. So we are trying to start that conversation, have that conversation And I think that comes back to what we talked about earlier about reputation as well. If we were trying to do this 10 years ago, I think we'd probably have been laughed out of wherever. But I think now we're able to show how by having competent ecologists and environmental managers, you can deliver a much better product and a much better outcome for nature and society. And with the rhetoric, and let's hope it's not all rhetoric at the moment about the importance of the environment and nature and green recoveries, it's a good time to be pressing that case. So that's certainly what we're doing.
Okay, is that, I mean, you've only just started the conversation. There's no particular timescales at all involved with
There's no particular timescales on it because we're in the. I mean, we've laid a bit of groundwork, but we're now starting to open up that conversation more forcefully, if you like. We can't say any timescales because, to some extent, you're in the hands of government, and with a lot of these things, it's about opportunity. You could fall on deaf ears this month, but 2 months' time, it might actually there might be a glimmering of an opportunity because something's changed, something's opinions change. There's somebody in a different role who's interested and are then willing to progress it. But we need to get support from government departments, so not just DEFRA, but MHCLG, business and industry. So we need to get quite a lot of support to create the argument. It's one of those difficult situations where if something badly went wrong, there would be more of an argument to protect the title and have a bit more control over who can call themselves an ecologist and who can do what. But we obviously don't want things to go really, really wrong. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we think the time is now to make a more vocal call for this is what we want to think is the direction of travel. Because the other thing to think about it is that there are more and more schemes coming in potentially that are going to require people to demonstrate their competence. As you know, we're working with Natural England and the Bat Conservation Trust on piloting earned recognition for licensable bat mitigation work in England. So that's about proving your competence in order to then be trusted with a much lighter touch licensing process to do high quality bat survey mitigation work. We're developing within CIEEM an ecological clerk of works accreditation scheme that is being very much driven by industry. So bit by bit, there are things happening that are going to require people to demonstrate their competence. Well, if they only had to do it sort of once effectively in order to earn the right to the title ecologist, that might actually be better and more cost effective for everyone all round. So I think the time is now right to be more vocally building on the groundwork we've been doing over the past couple of years and more vocally making a case to government.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Sally. Now, you've been very generous with your time. I'm going to start to wrap things up slightly, and I'm just going. I mean, just to give you a heads up, because this is a new question I didn't send to you before, but just thinking about a little elevator pitch as well for CIEEM. But I'll come back to that in a second about why should people join CIEEM. But in terms of, I mean, you've touched upon a few points there in terms of what's next for CIEEM in terms of, protecting the name of the ecologist and the mental platform and so forth. But what areas or what specific projects is CIEEM currently working on that we can expect some sort of update in the next 3 to 6 months then? So we're in September now, September 21. But so, in the latter part of this year, early part of next year, what can we look forward to being issued from CIEEM?
Okay, well, I want to give a bit of a plug for our work around diversity and inclusion. That's another big area of work for us, and we'll be publishing a report fairly soon on some Black and minority ethnic consultation recommendations as to how we can take steps in terms of people of colour, of creating a more diverse and inclusive profession. But of course, there are other areas of diversity and inclusivity we want to work on as well with our diversity and inclusion working group. We'll be launching our early careers training program within the next 6 months, and that's specifically designed for those who are just starting out in their careers. It's a 12-day training program that takes place over 12 to 18 months, a mixture of some sort of core modules and some optional modules. So that will be happening. We also will be finishing the pilot of the accredited ecological clerk of work scheme. So we'll then be making a decision as to how and when we roll that out, if that goes well. We are talked about some of our early careers activities, so setting up a new special interest group, doing more careers engagement work. We're planning quite a big project working with STEM and providing materials for more STEM ambassadors and getting more of our members as signed up as STEM ambassadors and getting them into schools. And that, of course, then links back to our diversity and inclusion priorities. We are registering as an endpoint assessment organisation for apprenticeships for the existing level 7 and level 6 apprenticeships that are relevant to us, and encouraging employers to take those up. But we also want to look at a level 3, level 4 apprenticeship role that would create yet another route into the profession. We're doing quite a bit of work around COP26 and COP15, although COP15, the face-to-face part of that has been postponed, but we'll be doing a series of events and activities for members around those two really, really important conferences. And we'll also, we're doing a lot of policy work at the moment. One of the things, even prior to Brexit, was the divergence within the countries of the UK in terms of some of the environmental policies. And of course, now that's post-Brexit, that's increasing divergence in terms of legislation and policy. And then also working with EU legislation and policy for our members who are not based in the UK. So we'll be publishing a briefing paper on what that divergence looks like. And we'll also be publishing our work on biodiversity, net gain and well-being, and how those two strands of policy can be interwoven. So quite a lot going on. Keep us out of mischief.
Absolutely.
And don't forget our autumn conference, of course, which we're hoping will be a face-to-face event in Bristol in mid-November on management, mitigation and monitoring.
Wonderful. I shall watch this space then. Yeah, that's amazing. There's a lot of work. So that's going to take you another 30 years, isn't it?
It is, but I've got a fantastic team who work their socks off and are really passionate about what they do in support of the profession. So and great volunteers. We're backed up by hundreds of volunteers who give thousands of hours of time each year to support others and in the profession. So it's a great example of good teamwork, I think.
Wonderful. And how many members of your team, employees, does CIEEM have?
How many employees? We've currently got 21, although that will be going up to 22 fairly shortly. So a mixture of full and part-time staff. And they're just a great team. And we're looking forward to seeing many of them back in the office again. We've moved offices recently. So we've moved from Winchester to a place called Anfield near Romsey, new, more environmentally friendly offices. And we're moving to a hybrid model of working starting next week.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this hybrid working situation forced upon us. It's going to remain with us, I'm sure. Now, this the Ecology Academy podcast is aimed at a wide range of listeners, particularly early career ecologists, but equally so, professional ecologists who are moving through, their companies, and as well as environmental leaders. So what do you think employers look for or consider when appointing an ecologist? And what advice would you give to, we'll start with an early career ecologist. If you were providing your personal advice to someone who's either entering our profession, what would it be?
I think hang on to your passion for your subject. I think I would invest time in learning your field craft, your field skills, your species identification. It's very easy to very quickly get drawn into other areas of activity, but those core skills of being able to recognize a reasonable range of plants, a reasonable range of invertebrates, perhaps finding your taxa that you really want to focus on, and start to study in depth, and learning from others to do that, I think is never time that's wasted. It will stand you in good stead later in your career, and it's very difficult to find the time to fit it in later. I think in my early stages of the career, I'd certainly be doing that. I'd also be talking. I'd be taking every opportunity to talk to other ecologists and environmental managers and network. If you're a member of CIEEM, one of the biggest pleasures if you go along to a geographic section event or a special interest group event is seeing young people there, or people coming into the profession, and just taking the opportunity to talk to more experienced practitioners and get advice, make contacts, start to build relationships. You're very welcome, and it's really time well invested.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sally. Now, I would say for you to do your 30-second pitch, but I think you've done a very good job already. but as we wrap things up, Sally, is there anything you'd like to additionally like to add from our conversation today, or equally so, how we can actually connect with either yourself or members of your team, or actually get involved with CIEEM directly?
Sure, thank you. Well, I would just finish really by saying I do think ecology and environmental management is a great career. It's a good time to be joining the profession and being part of the profession, but it is what we all make it. And that one of the things about being involved in a professional body is that the membership can help shape the future direction of the profession and how it operates. And I'm really excited. I have quite a lot of ambition for the next few years for both CIEEM and for our industry. And I want people to be a part of it and to be proud of it. It's been I regard it as a huge honour to be the CEO of CIEEM. I love the job. Nobody's taking it away from me anytime soon. I really enjoy getting out and about, meeting members as well, and I've missed doing that. So it's a real privilege for me to be able to have this opportunity to talk to your audience, Richard. I thank you for that, and I look forward to welcoming more members into the Institute and meeting new members over the next coming months and years. And let's tackle some of the issues that we've talked about. Let's tackle them together, but with a view to making us being a standout profession that people want to join, whatever background they come from, whatever history they have. Let's come and be an ecologist, and surely it's got to be the most fantastic job in the world. I think so. A bit biased.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Sally Hayns, thank you for joining me today on the Ecology Academy podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you, Richard.
If you enjoy our show and want to help, then please click on the subscribe button and rate us on your favourite podcast player, as that's how you can inspire ecologists in the making, help retain great talent, and provide insights of our industry to a much wider audience of why ecology really does matter. Thank you. And remember, learning is a lifelong endeavour, so stay curious, be adventurous, and build bridges for others to cross.